In his book, The Blind Watchmaker, Richard Dawkins claims that biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose, which is a rather curious definition, seeing as he goes on to spend the rest of his book, and his life, attempting to prove that the universe has not been designed for a purpose. The origin of life is a controversial, fire-hot battleground that most people like to steer clear of. But there may be more than simply the origin of the universe at stake. If intelligent design actually has merit, what would a creator with a capital C imply? Pursuing the idea of intelligent design should not be taken lightly. Before it can be dismissed as something silly and completely outside of the search for truth, an idea that has only been popular for about a century, it needs a fair trial. So what merit does intelligent design even have? It comes in the form of an answer to three simple questions. Firstly, how did the first cell come about? When it comes to the origin of life, it's universally agreed that this is the most important question. If anything was found that could create spontaneous life without influence from other life, the theory of evolution could potentially become the simplest explanation. That's the thing though. Spontaneous life, even when attempted to be created by humans in a lab, has never been recorded. If we as humans can't even take an already formed cell and give it life, what makes us think that the universe could have magically done it for us in nature? The thought that the first cell might have spontaneously come into existence originated back when cells couldn't be observed close enough to see any of their complexity. For all people knew, cells were just little globs of jelly. That's what they looked like under a microscope, after all. Back then, this theory made some sense. Today, however, with all the knowledge we have about the tens of millions of things happening in a single cell at any given time, trying to say that one of them simply came into existence is just laughable. Alright, laughable maybe, but it's still plausible. The universe had billions of years to create life, right? Okay. Assuming that all the right pieces were there at the right time and that nature was able to fuse them in a way that we haven't even been able to create in a fully formed cell in a lab, let's say it's plausible. But what about all those pieces? This brings us to the next question. Where did the first proteins come from? Most evolutionary biologists will laugh at this question and point to the Miller-Urey experiment, a test tube simulation of what the Earth was hypothesized to be like that actually generated over 20 spontaneous amino acids, which are what make up proteins, which are what make up most of the cell. Without mentioning that the experiment doesn't actually reflect what we believe the Earth's early conditions to be like anymore, this is still kind of like saying, we can spontaneously generate puzzle pieces. Thus, we could probably create the original puzzle if we just shook these pieces up in a box for millions of years. The chances of finding even a single functional protein created with random amino acids are 1 out of 10 to the power of 164. In every other field of science, these chances would be written off as something so unlikely it wouldn't even be worth considering. If you were betting on intelligent design versus evolution at this point, it's pretty clear where the money is. This also doesn't address the issue of how proteins could possibly be formed without an already functioning cell. Proteins must be folded into certain shapes before they can function, and they're folded by other proteins. You need a protein to make a protein. Trying to argue that somehow some amino acids came together in the right sequence, folded in exactly the right way, and became one of the proteins that creates other proteins, it's such a slippery slope that it's just skydiving now. Which leads us to a final paradox. Where did the information in DNA come from? Alright, so we're assuming that somehow amino acids formed proteins which formed a fully functional cell. How does that cell know what to do to keep itself functioning? DNA. Within a cell's DNA is all its information for creating proteins and directing the cell's activities. DNA is already ridiculously complex. It has an alphabet of 4 different letters that contain instructions for everything, and this data is unzipped and copied, and the copies are transferred to where they can give instructions for new proteins. But just dwelling on complexity isn't enough. German theoretical biologist Bernd Olaf Kuppers puts it best. The problem of the origin of life is clearly basically equivalent to the problem of the origin of biological information. Shake up a box of Scrabble letters. The pattern you'll get will certainly be complex, but will it be significant? Will it mean anything? The fact that DNA is not only complex, but also significant, is the absolute deal breaker for those against intelligent design. Perhaps you could ask me to just assume that amino acids came together to be proteins, which came together to form a cell. But you can't plop The Great Gatsby in front of me and expect me to believe that these words were typed up by a monkey on a typewriter who just happened to mash the right buttons. This is not science. This is just trying to avoid considering the possibility of an intelligent creator, or rather, a god. Richard Dawkins himself has admitted to the possibility of life being seeded by aliens. Essentially, he said that, well, maybe we were designed by aliens, but designed by a god? Of course not. The question of where proteins came from, how a cell is created, and where the information in DNA comes from, these are all so easily explained by intelligent design, aliens or no. It's not surprising that the leader of the neo-atheists has admitted that design isn't necessarily a bad idea. Star Trek's Spock once said, "Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, is the truth." According to leading thinkers like Dawkins, intelligent design isn't so impossible. Spontaneous life, on the other hand, as you can see, that's a bit of a different story. Thanks for watching.